So, those of you who were on, signed in right before the class start may have heard that I'm traveling. I'm in Colorado, headed towards Seattle, and I have the opportunity, as I travel, to watch my heart, what is actually present in my heart. I've noticed in the past that there's something about flying that usually is easy for me to feel goodwill. There's just a lot of time in an airport and loading the plane and even in the plane when you're somewhat idle and there's a lot of people to watch. And, rather than just letting my mind judge people, um, it's possible to feel goodwill. There's something about, just all these people traveling, all having this purpose. They're getting somewhere. Often it's to be with family. Um, there's something about that has in the past made it easy for me to feel goodwill. I found, however, in this trip out, that was not the case. That I found in my mind there was a lot more kind of unkind thoughts, more kind of looking at people with suspicion and mistrust. Um, and the immediate cause of it is obvious to me. It's the recent election. And, from my personal standpoint, and again, here, I don't assume that everybody shares my political opinions, but they're relevant for this practice, which is, I'm having a hard time understanding how someone who is as character disordered as Donald Trump could be given this amount of power, and that people not be able to recognize that, see the dangers, inherent dangers. And so I find that I'm really vulnerable to looking people and projecting on them, based on their looks. Like, can you spot a Trump voter? Of course you can't. It's ridiculous. But the mind is doing this. I notice my mind doing this sort of thing. And there's this kind of grumbling that goes on. However, I'm mindful of it. It's not that I just let it kind of go and get sunk in and blended with it. But I just see that there's this temptation to be angry and blaming that's going on right now in me. So this class is really perfect, I have to say, for what I need. And I'm grateful for the chance to see the contrast in how I'm experiencing my fellow passengers in an airplane. And since I know that none of them really, except for my wife, who I'm traveling with, I can also acknowledge that most of my thoughts, all of my thoughts, perhaps are just projections of something that's inside me that I really need to pay attention to. Because what I realize, and this is really important, is that ill will does not feel good. It does not feel good in any of its forms, whether it's fear, suspicion, anger, all different sorts of grades of hostility that we go into. It really doesn't feel good. It harms the body. The body that's feeling it is, the nervous system senses that you're perceiving something that's threatening, and it changes your physiology. And so it's not a healthy thing for the body. It's not a healthy thing for the mind. It's suffering. This is suffering. And I introduce you to that phrase that those of you who have been with me for a while know I love and repeat, which comes straight from the Theravada Sutras, which is idam dukkam. This is suffering. Just to see clearly, this is what it is. Suffering is happening. That the heart is closed. And the heart that's afraid is usually closed. There are perhaps some moments where the heart is in fear and open, but mostly it's a thing that very much closes our hearts. And so I'm grateful to have seen it. And I just offer to you this reflection at this time, that you're not doing yourself any favor with these feelings, even though you might not know how to stop them. There might not be the control to stop them. You might feel in some way the victim of them, but just a simple kind of observation. This is ill will, and this is suffering. In a neutral way, it's helpful. It creates a certain kind of stepping back from the state of mind and the thoughts that are producing it. That's very helpful. It's really helpful to reflect. This doesn't do you good. It doesn't make the world any better or any safer. And sometimes I notice that sort of delusion when I'm kind of getting up on my high horse and preaching to some imaginary audience in my mind, that this is not actually making me feel better or make the world feel better. It's not actually making it safer as you do that. That goodwill is actually what makes the world safe. Ill will is actually what makes the world unsafe. And ill will is what leads to violence and other actions that we see directly harming. So it's a really potent thing to face in oneself. And all of us have the seeds of ill will inside of us. It just takes a situation to activate it. And this feels like a really powerful situation to activate it. And of course, it's understandable. I can empathize. I can say I empathize with those of you who are also feeling this vulnerability right now. But nonetheless, it is something to face in ourselves. For many years now, I don't know, 30 years, but perhaps or more, I've recalled something that I've heard the Dalai Lama say that made such a strong impression on me. Someone interviewing him asked him if he ever feels anger about the Chinese invading Tibet. And if you know the history of that, it's quite brutal. Really a genocide of monks and nuns and many lay people, destruction of centuries of art and buildings, and torture and misery. So it's not a happy history. And so the Dalai Lama escaped from Tibet, and as a leader of his people, he understands this. So the interviewer asked him about feeling angry. And he admitted, yes, there are times when he feels angry toward the Chinese. But then he said something that really moved me, which was, the Chinese have taken my country. I don't want them to take my mind as well. And it kind of like, when I first heard it, it made a strong impression that when you let someone else's actions determine your own inner state of being, they in a sense have taken you over. They've colonized your mind. And so I think that's something I want to, really lift up in this class. Again, I'm not blaming anybody for this happening. It happens. And I think that, politics of both sides of kind of the partisan divide has gotten better at trying to hijack our minds in this way with anger, ill will, and fear. And so we're often bombarded by it. So what arose in me flying out here, when I observed kind of what was in my heart and its effect on me, and just knowing that this is going to be an ongoing vulnerability. This is not something I feel is like, now I've made the shift. This is an ongoing vulnerability, but I found this intention inside of myself that I do not want to have my mind be taken over by the suggestion of ill will from others or from my own thoughts. I don't want that to happen. That I want to be deeply committed to that, to the practice of finding goodwill and seeing goodness where it's present, not letting myself be blind to the goodness that's present because I'm generating thoughts of ill will or fear. That's a really strong and heavy lift to do. And yet, I think it's utterly necessary for our psychic survival. And to learn this skill, I believe will only make us more effective in any action we do in the world to make it better. If we can actually recognize our ill will, step back from it, access goodwill, and act and speak from that, I think it will have a powerful effect, whether just on the people near to us or who knows, anything that we do. So that is really, I feel like I found my mission, if you can, for the foreseeable future. It doesn't personally mean that I'm going to do tons of loving kindness meditation, but I'll probably do some. But I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to guard my heart, which in this tradition means noticing what's present and seeing clearly what is skillful and unskillful. That's really where it all begins, is to see that, to know whether what is currently inside of you is skillful or unskillful, to practice restraint when appropriate, to arouse goodwill, and to speak from that when possible. Again, life's awfully complex. These situations that arise are very complex. I had the fortune really to, the first people that I saw on this trip out here is my niece and her family. And they live in Colorado Springs. They have both been career Air Force people. My niece is still in the Air Force. Her husband recently got out, but still works for the military. They and their parents are very conservative. We did not talk about politics. I don't know who they voted for. I have my suspicion. But what I realized was that I could actually focus on how much love and caring I was observing right there in the room for me. They have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old that are just precious. And I just saw goodness everywhere. And I saw the strength and goodness of my niece, who's gone through a lot of health problems. There's been challenges in her life, and she's risen to them in really beautiful ways. And I don't want to be blind to that. I want to see what's there. And I felt a real shift. I was meditating in the basement. They put us in the guest room in the basement, and I got up early in the morning because I'm on East Coast time. And I find this vulnerability in the middle of the night, in the dark, to have dark thoughts. Anybody else have this? That wake me up. It didn't happen so much that morning, but I did wake up very early, and my mind started going down the wrong track. And I sat to meditate, and I decided I will just sit there until I feel a shift. And the first shift was really just to come out of my head into my body. And that's why this meditation that we did today first is so essential. Like, just to bring you out of your thinking mind, to know the skill to do that, and to marshal the presence and persistence when things are kind of wild in there. to be able to settle in the body and feel the safety that's here now in the body. So that really was what I sat for a long time to do, and it happened. And then, I noticed not so much right when I was meditating, but coming out of the meditation, Kate was up by then, and I could feel like the heart intelligence was present. And that's what ill will obscures. It obscures the intelligence of our heart. And so my wife was up by that point, and we talked for a while, and just had a little kind of love fest about my niece and her family. And I could feel as I contemplated them that I was seeing clearly, you know. Seeing clearly isn't denying what's also present, but it's seeing with the eyes of love and understanding with the eyes of love. And it was really worth the time to get there. And I don't always get there. I'll say it's not a guarantee, and it probably won't be a guarantee for you, but it's worth the effort to do that. So goodwill, if I can just define it, because I think in this case, the definition is very helpful. Goodwill is the steadfast wish for an other's well-being and happiness, and the inner causes of that happiness. I read this recently. It's not one that I remember from the Theravadan tradition. It's a little different in that second phrase that's added. And I thought that second phrase is really helpful. Let me repeat it. So goodwill is the steadfast wish for another's well-being and happiness, and the inner causes of that happiness. You're wishing that another being has the inner causes of happiness. It helps for me to define it a little bit, to narrow it down a little bit. When you're wishing well-being and happiness, there's an acknowledgement that that has inner roots. It springs from inside. And it's often helpful, particularly if you're working with someone in your life who's quite unskillful. And I'm sure we all have at least a few of those in our lives, in our families, among our coworkers, among our neighbors, wherever. We have difficult people. And so it's really helpful as you're practicing goodwill to wish people the inner causes of happiness too, because it's a lot easier to feel goodwill towards somebody who's acting in loving and kind ways. It's not so easy to feel goodwill when somebody is acting in unkind and thoughtless ways. But nonetheless, you can still wish them happiness, because a part of wishing someone happiness, a deep part of it, is wishing them skillfulness, because that's what's going to bring them happiness. If they actually find skillful means inside of them to deal with this human condition, which is incredibly difficult on all levels to travel through, We all want to be happy, and we all find life difficult. That's just a fundamental truth, a fundamental reflection that is the heart of goodwill, is that all beings, not just human beings, all beings wish to be happy, and every action that they take is aimed at happiness, even when they're not doing it wisely. That's just a powerful reflection. I return to it over and over. And so when we wish someone happiness, when we meet them with goodwill, And we'll certainly talk about other components of goodwill. This is like the most essential thing that one is doing when one is offering goodwill is, wishing well to a person. And it's like we're offering a precious gift when we offer this goodwill and meet them with that. Goodwill is the glue that holds us together. It's part of what makes some experience in families nurturing and a place of support, and other experiences in families to be a place of division and recrimination and resentment. It's a very powerful factor in the mix of all the things that bring about those conditions. And so I invite you to not shy away in this course from taking on the places that are difficult for you. However, I'm going to encourage you to start where it's easy, to learn this first where it's easy. And maybe that's where you'll stay for all 6 weeks. You might stay with the easier part. Though in some ways, where we usually start is not easy for people. We start with goodwill toward yourself. And many people find this very difficult to offer themselves any goodwill. Their minds are often conditioned to offer ill will to themselves, to criticize themselves, to complain and find fault, and to feel aversion and disgust, even contempt for maybe not all of themselves, but for aspects of themselves. This is a really common part of our conditioning. And so, but it's also the foundation of goodwill towards others. So we'll begin with that. Really essential to feeling goodwill is safety. And it's really easy. And in some cases, it's actually reality to feel that your feeling of safety or lack of safety is conditioned on external factors and what other people do. It's very easy to take on that point of view. But I'm going to suggest a different point of view, which I find helpful and true, which is you can't wait for everything to be safe in order to feel safe. You can't let your mind fool you into that relationship with safety. You can't wait for everything to be safe in order to feel safe and to have your nervous system relax and trust. This is a profound kind of paradox for people to take in. And so certainly if this kind of is a hard one for you to take in, we need to talk about it more, but just present it now. I mean, just on a physical level, it's true. We are never safe physically. We as bodies are always vulnerable to sickness, injury, and death. And it's just a part of being a body in the world. And so by some way, we do manage to laugh and enjoy life, and yet we're actually never safe. We somehow allow ourselves to feel safe when in reality, anything could happen at any moment. We don't have to worry about it. Some people do. Some people really do make present all the time the threats to their physical well-being. And that is suffering. That's really suffering. So part of the difficulty and challenge here is to find safety where your mind will be sometimes telling you it's not safe, it's not safe, it's not safe. So the first the first kind of tools you have is the meditation we did at the start of this class, which is to get out of your mind, to relax your thoughts, to slow them down at least, and to spend time in the body with the felt sense of okayness that the body can have, to begin to kind of access that, just a state of calm, just a relative state of calm. We're not asking for perfection here, but a relative state of calm and a sense of what it's like to drop into the body and breath and find a place of refuge. Because it's very hard to have goodwill when we don't feel safe. The other thing that is important for goodwill is to access the heart intelligence. Now, those of you who have been in my class for a while will know I talk about this, that there are at least, but mostly 3 kinds of intelligence that are operating in us. And mostly in this culture, we go with the head intelligence, the conceptual mind. That's what we educate for the most part. And we're kind of taught to rely on it. And there's a deep belief that it's our heads and their ability to conceptualize and predict and strategize and plan, that's what keeps us safe in the world. And that belief puts a tremendous amount of momentum and importance behind the head intelligence. But it's not our only intelligence. And it's not really even what meditation aims for. Although there are some meditations that use thoughts, and loving kindness is one. Along with the conceptual mind, there is the heart mind. There is the heart intelligence, which in Buddhism is called prajna in Sanskrit, or panya in Pali. It's heart wisdom. It's the wisdom that is in all of us that comes forth when we are present with our hearts and when we've been allowed to mature through our lives with some safety and some concern from others. Our heart intelligence is able to grow and mature and guide us. And that heart intelligence is very important for recognizing goodness and recognizing the value of things and feeling close to others and wishing them well and nurturing connection. All of those things require the heart intelligence. The head intelligence doesn't do that very well. You can have an idea of connection, but it's really this. And you know, through your own experience, what it's like to be with someone who really is offering this to you, their open-hearted goodwill and heart intelligence. You can feel it almost palpably in your body. It creates a kind of field around it, if we can put it that way. The heart creates a field that can be felt by other people. And I'm not sure how well Zoom does with that. Some, I think it does some, but I sometimes wonder if a little bit is lost by not being bodily present with you and with each other. But that's really important for goodwill to come forth, is that heart intelligence. And we will talk more about that. And then the belly intelligence too. It's very important for the feeling of safety. Very, very important for the feeling of right here, right now. So when we meditate and we're with the breath, there can be the sense, the growing sense, and sometimes you have to even use your conceptual mind a little to say, everything's safe now. You can relax. But right down in the belly, there's the sense of the body being held by gravity, being nurtured by the oxygen in the breath, that everything is okay right now. And there's a kind of intelligence in the belly that moves from that, the here and now, and the kind of connectedness with one's immediate environment. That's also important to access. So anyway, we'll be talking more about that.